Yalda, it is amazing that we're together in the same place. We're here in Doha, Qatar. What a great opportunity to be at the same place, same time, in person.
Exactly. It's always great to have our paths cross and be in the same room together. And hello and welcome to the world, to our listeners. As Richard said, I'm Yalda.
And I'm Richard Engel. Thank you to everyone who's following us. And if you're not following, please do so you never miss an episode. And you can write in at theworld@sky.uk. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. So let's get started. This episode is going to be a little different because it's holiday season and we're going to be doing a bit of a look back. A lot of people do year in review shows or year in review articles, which, by the way, I always read. Do you read those?
All of the
I
time.
love the
I love them.
look back at the most interesting stories. So we're going to look back at some of the stories that we remember most.
Absolutely. It's been a huge year for world events. We haven't stopped, have we? I mean, whether it's been the war in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, and of course, the US elections.
So I think when I look back at this year, obviously for me, it was dominated a lot by the aftermath of the October 7th attack. The ongoing war in Gaza, I think, was a memorable event and a dominant event. Also, the war in Ukraine. But it's in our business, as you know, you don't just think about stories. Yes, there's the war in Gaza. You think about people. And there's this one young woman in Gaza named Nadine. And she's a teenager, really. So a few years ago, I met this young woman named Nadine, and she's from a very educated family, and she speaks English, and she has an older brother, a younger brother, loving mom and dad. And I used to sort of check in on them and get a pulse because they were, regular people. They were not extremists. They were not extremely rich. They were not extremely poor. They were reasonable, nice people. And what struck me most about this year is I saw her again. I didn't see her in person. We got all these videos. We decided, since I've had this relationship with her, we were going to go and film with her. And this is a young woman who lived in Gaza City in a nice apartment with plants and flowers and books. And they wanted to be doctors and had high hopes and they had high expectations for their futures because they seemed like that kind of people. They valued education. Now, when I saw this video, I don't know, stopped in my tracks. She's living in a tent is not the right word to describe it. It's like a shelter. It looks like some sort of animal corral made of flattened cans, a canvas on top. She and her family have made a sink with again flattened metal, and they've cobbled together this wooden frame for it. And I was watching the squalor that they're living in and how she's changed. She's now wearing a veil. She never used to before. So her talk is peppered with religious talk. Her older brother is dead. The house is destroyed. The younger brother got badly sick from one of the many communicable diseases that are going around in Gaza. He almost died. He is now recovered, so to speak, and is living in this corral that they've managed to build for themselves, this sort of devastated world. And cries, we interviewed him and how he feels about his brother, and he was saying, oh, the little boy, I don't care about all that we've lost and that the house is lost. I just want my brother back. And I'll just remember that for me encapsulated what happened to Gaza in this last year through this story of this young woman who I knew before in a different life, in a different circumstance, a circumstance that was tough before, but not this. And it's not over. She's still there. She's there now.
You realize, Richard, just the horrors of war and what it actually does to people and their lives. And that's why I always think that what we do when we personalize a story or talk about individuals in these situations, because they're not just numbers. These are people with stories and lives and school, and they want to fall in love, and they
yes,
want to go to
exactly.
work, and they want to have a better life for
And
themselves.
she's not an extremist, or wasn't before, but I don't know what's going to happen to the young people who are there. How angry are they going to get when you see this misery all around you, and Gaza's been destroyed and made unlivable? These people who are people at the end of the day, not just numbers or a problem that has to be dealt with as they grow up. So that's one story I'll remember. What about you? Any
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, if I mean the situation in Gaza is unbearable and devastating and always hard to talk about. But if I were to slightly shift our attention, and I remember being in India, and I got a text message from someone in the United States going, something has happened to Donald Trump. He was at a rally, and they can hear gunshots. Turn on your TV, find out from your newsroom what's happening. And because he was seeing some wires come through. So I contacted the newsroom, and they said, yeah, we're not quite sure what it is, but they heard gunshots, and turned out someone had actually, attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. And the way we are, we just kind of drop everything.
Yeah, I remember
forget-
watching that.
Forget
I was actually
absolutely
with my
everything.
mother at the time, and we were both watching the TV, transfixed.
And trying to figure out what's going on.
I thought Trump just won the election at that moment. Is that's the thought that went
Well,
through
it
my
was
mind.
the images that when he emerged, and the fist up in the air, and the chanting into the mic, fight, fight, fight. And you realize ever the showman, forever he kind of has an understanding. He's a 78-year-old man, but he has an understanding of what those images mean. And he wanted that image to be captured. Blood running from the side of his face, fist up in the air, chanting fight, 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 as he's being bungled away by the Secret Service. So all this is developing, and I'm now looking for a flight out of India. I get myself back to London, I switch bags, and it is now 24 hours.
So you just left right then and there.
I was like, I got to get out of here. Trump, there's just been an assassination attempt. And, you suddenly realize these stories, that period, so much happened that you would think that we'd be talking for months about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But so much has happened since. It now feels like a blip in kind of a long list of other things that happened.
Yeah, a presidential candidate assassination almost got him.
Absolutely.
A couple of centimeters grazed his ear, and it could have changed the course of history.
He credits those immigration charts that he was talking to for tilting his head and the gunman missing him. He said he had an immigration chart up, and as he was looking up at it, the guy hit.
It's very possible, maybe.
But so I get myself, it's now 24 hours away from the Republican National Convention. This is the convention where they come to endorse the candidate that they want.
It was that close, right? It was right on the eve of the RNC, the Republican National Convention.
Absolutely. So I got myself to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a city I quite like. I spent a lot of time there during the 2020 election.
And for non-Americans, this is the event where the Republicans announced their candidate. Everyone knew that he was going to be the presidential candidate, but this was his official sort of coronation. He's our guy, in a big lavish event with music and pop stars to say, he's our man. Let's get excited about bringing him to the White House. Exactly.
They announce him. They sort of make it official that he is the candidate at that point. So I arrive in Milwaukee, security's tight, but it was extraordinary being inside because it wasn't just a regular RNC. It felt almost cult-like, the MAGA movement. They were talking about the fact that Donald Trump was there for a higher purpose. He had survived this assassination attempt to become almost, he was sent by God.
Other people were wearing
everyone was wearing the
cotton bandage on their ears in solidarity, and maybe more in emulation.
Absolutely. And as I said, it started with an assassination attempt. Joe Biden then steps down. Kamala Harris, within the space of those 3 or 4 days, Kamala Harris then is coronated. And rather than an actual open process, they said, you know what, we're going to put our lot behind her. We're going to endorse her.
I wonder how well that decision holds up the scrutiny of history. But that's a conversation for another day. Today, this is the look back year in our memories, in our journalistic memories. What else?
Well, from one assassination attempt to ending up in Lebanon, Richard. When the pages went off, when Hezbollah fighters suddenly had these pages that were
I remember that.
exploding
Oh, yes.
in their faces, on their belts. I also had a moment where I thought, pages, who still uses pages? But they were using these pages not to be tracked, and yet it turned out that the pages were suddenly exploding on people's hips and in their
Yeah, that's
faces
the
and in their
irony of
hands.
that the Hezbollah thought, well, we'll use these pagers because they're old-fashioned technology. They'll be safer and harder to track than an iPhone, which could be hacked and tracked. Whoops.
Walkie-talkies were exploding. Everyone was thinking, my God, what's happened?
Is this memory too?
This is memory too. So I go from an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which, as we can see, won him that election. We end up in Lebanon, where Hezbollah is not only decapitated, but their longtime Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the charismatic leader of Hezbollah, revered but also reviled, who was famous and then infamous across the Arab world, and who had organized this extraordinary army, non-state actor of an army, and suddenly he's assassinated. And we've seen how that has changed the course of the reshaping the Middle East as we see it now.
Profoundly. And that's my you want to hear my second one?
Absolutely. Go
So
for it.
the first one was this sort of gut punch experience of watching the video. First, because I couldn't see Nadine, was watching the video and the conditions. And we had hours and hours of footage of her and her family, or what's left of her family. The other image I think I'll always remember of this year that has just passed, or that is coming to an end, is I remember being standing on a rooftop in Tyre in southern Lebanon. And the hotel we were staying at was this old fort. And it was an old Crusader era fort. And next to it was a Phoenician temple, or Phoenician port, I should say, but it had columns. And then nearby there was an actual Phoenician and later Roman era temple. And I used to go swimming every day. There were columns below. I saw a turtle swimming by, which was beautiful. So I would go out and interview Hezbollah fighters and see the destruction, and then come back to our medieval fort, take a swim through the ruins. And it's beautiful, just extraordinary place. It's a terrible tragedy that all these conflicts and wars happen in such gorgeous historic places, often. But the memory I have is standing on the roof of this fort when the Iranians fired their ballistic missiles. And it was the second time. So I was in Jerusalem for the first time, and I remember that distinctly. And I remember watching the Iranian missiles fly over the old city and flying. I could see them going up and over the Al-Aqsa Mosque at altitude. And then I saw them again standing on the roof of this old fort in Tyre in Lebanon and watching this amazing light and sound show, mostly light show, because it was at such altitude you couldn't hear the explosions. You could just see them bursting like fireworks in the air. It was the middle of the night. And I remember so distinctly thinking, the Middle East is changing. This is not going to go unanswered. There's going to be massive consequences for what I'm seeing right now. And I think we are seeing that realignment in the Middle East that you're just talking about, with spillover into Syria, obviously consequences for Iran, even here in Doha. One of the main subjects at this conference is all about the knock-on effects of the Lebanon war, of the Gaza war, and where does it go from here. So I think sometimes interesting to think back at these little moments when in that moment, I know it was the start of something new shifting.
I think, like you say, when we saw those sequence of events in Lebanon, so we were exhausted coming back from the United States when so much political upheaval. Donald Trump gets shot. Joe Biden steps down. Kamala Harris steps in. So we come back and we're hoping for some kind of respite. And then Lebanon erupts. I mean, we've seen the turmoil in Gaza and the devastation. And then, of course, Lebanon erupts, as you say, the pages exploding, the walkie-talkies, Hassan Nasrallah being killed. And then the missiles that we saw launch. I mean, we were both in country when that was happening.
Which is when we launched the world. We launched this podcast, which has become a fun new part of our lives. Should we take some questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
We've got a few written down here. One is from Hosai Ayubi. When will the international community take action on Afghan women's rights? You have to take this
I
one.
have to take this one. Richard, we talked about the stories that have made impact on us this year. But I think for me, the Afghan story makes an impact every single day. Not only is it well over 1,177 days that Afghan girls, or more now, where they can't go to school, but just in the last few days, we heard a new edict, a new restriction. Nurses and midwives can no longer study at university. They cannot operate and function. I mean, just think about this. Women in childbirth, what are they supposed to rely on?
And I don't even, what's the point of this? The Taliban has serious issues. Men and women shouldn't be mixing. Fine, it's I kind of get it from their perspective, fine. But you don't want male doctors touching women or seeing women. Okay, fine, it's extreme. But you don't even want women?
Women?
So what are they supposed to do? They're all supposed to just die?
Well, they're supposed to just, maternal mortality rates in the last 25 years
I don't even get the logic of this
gone
one.
down in Afghanistan. There's been massive improvements. I mean, some places felt like, in Badakhshan, for example, you felt like you were in the 6th century before the Americans came in.
But I'm not asking you to be a Taliban rep, but what's the logic to say we don't want women to learn how to become midwives?
Richard,
so who's supposed to be delivering the babies?
What is the logic of not allowing women to take their children to a park? Women are banned from taking their children out of the house into a park, let alone, preventing midwives and nurses from operating and going into hospitals and working, or even home births. This is going to set the country back in a massive way. So just to answer Jose Ayubi's question about when they're going to take action, I mean, I think one of the most disappointing things about the Biden administration abandoning the Afghan project was that when you talk so much about human rights, women's rights, democracy, and then you've got these Afghan women who can not only go to school, but they're also now supposed to give birth without any health care.
Your mother was a midwife.
That's right. Yeah. So this story is actually quite personal about the midwives. For me, is quite personal because my mum, I always heard about. She worked as a young midwife in Afghanistan. Before I was born.
So it was a normal
traveling across the provinces
and would go and help women deliver.
Absolutely. When the Soviets were in the country, she would travel from province to province and help women in the darkest corners of the country. And yet today, in 2024, midwives are being told stay at home.
I don't even get it. I don't even get it. I don't see how that is in any way part of their sort of, they claim to be this, true Islamist, but half the world's population are women. They have no concern. They have wives, they have daughters.
It's baffling. I mean, they do send their daughters here to Doha to study and come to school. So that's for
the leaders
day.
do. The leaders do.
Yeah. But let's take a question.
I bet you they have somebody helping them give birth.
Absolutely. Well, they're in Doha, aren't they? And when their daughters are operating here and going to school in Doha and going to university, I met a Taliban leader's daughter who proudly told me she goes to university.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly this. Let's take another question from Tekendra Sharma, who's asking, is the world heading towards World War III, and will the spark again be in Europe?
Will the spark again be in Europe? Ooh, I hope we're not heading toward World War III, but can I sound... I don't know. Do I have to sound overly pessimistic? We said, come and join us and have a glass of eggnog and we'll tell you our stories. And I'm going to say, I wouldn't rule out World War III if I drink the eggnog, enjoy it, because you don't know if you're going to have it next year. I don't think it's that imminent, but I do think that it is very possible. We've had 2 world wars, and what's to suggest that we won't have another? People talk a lot about AI. I don't think that necessarily AI is going to take over sort of the Terminator effect, that AI computers are just going to wake up and take over the machines and decide that we as humans need to be eliminated. Maybe, but I think it's more likely that this kind of technology speeds up conflicts. I think we're seeing the pace of conflicts intensify, and AI is all about games and problem solving, and countries are already starting to use AI, and militaries are already starting to use AI to figure out how do we beat our adversary or how do we protect against a foreign invasion. So I think once you start to see that come online, I think it will speed up and intensify conflicts. So I hope I'm wrong, but generally whenever there's a new transformative technology like nuclear technology, we immediately use it, and we immediately use it for war.
Yeah. And I think we barely survived the 20th century. So who's to say that we're going to get
So
through?
have yourself a merry little Christmas.
But in all seriousness, I mean, we saw what happened in the 20th century. Are we going to go into a Third World War? We talked about the different arenas of war, the different theaters of war in one of the other episodes. I don't think any region is distinct. They're all interconnected, whether that's Asia, Europe, or the Middle East. We can see now the way that these wars are conducted and the way that these leaders operate. They use each other's proxies and fight each other's wars for them. So we may or may not be, heading towards World War III, but I wouldn't rule out what worst case scenario could look like.
So should we wrap up this holiday edition with a couple of year ahead predictions?
Are we doing a year ahead prediction?
Year ahead prediction. You always like the long-term predictions.
I do.
Long-term predictions or year-out predictions. 2025 predictions.
I think over the course of the next year, I'm going to watch Iran very closely and see. We keep hearing maximum pressure on Iran, and that's what's coming from the Trump administration. Will Iran make the concessions? And we've seen the Iranian empire weaken. What sort of concessions will they now make as we move into 2025?
You stole mine. I agree with you wholeheartedly that, yes, I think Iran is in the crosshairs and will increasingly be in the crosshairs. Now, what does that mean? If Iran is under a lot of pressure, it can either react very violently, and it could be a conflict, and Netanyahu and Trump could decide to put maximum pressure, military pressure on it, or it could force Iran to shift and change and maybe adapt to take a different approach. I don't know, but I think Iran is in play next year. I think big changes are going to come. But since you already picked Iran, let's go somewhere beyond the region. Don't have anything off the top of my head. I think Ukraine. I think Ukraine war enters a new phase. It probably wraps up. And it probably wraps up not in an end of conflict. I think the Ukrainians are going to get a raw deal. I think they know it's coming. They're looking for NATO. They're looking for reassurances. They want to win somehow. I'm not sure they're going to get it. I think that with Trump and Russia in a pretty strong position, they'll say, you know what your deal is, you know what you're getting, the bombings will stop, and not much more than that. The Europeans will step in. Maybe the Europeans can do it. I don't have tremendous confidence in their ability to get that kind of unified political support, find the money necessary to pay for sustaining Ukraine. So maybe the Europeans start and keep it going for a few months, 6 months or whatever. But over the course of the year of next year, I think it's going to be very tough for Ukraine.
And their greatest fear that the war wraps up, on paper, but actually a war of attrition continues at their expense.
Well, what a happy, optimistic show! Thank you all for listening, and don't throw yourselves out the window. Didn't we say at the beginning we're going to do this podcast to help unpack the world to make it seem less scary?
What are you doing for Christmas?
Me? I'm hoping in this business you never really know to spend it with family. And as you know, I like to go to Italy. So my hope and plan is to go to Italy and stuff myself with as much pasta as I could possibly eat and drink a lot of wine.
For breakfast.
Ice cream for breakfast. That's Theo's favorite thing. We go and have granita, which is like Italian kind of not gelato, but it's like an Italian shave ice. And in Sicily, they have it for breakfast. It's amazing.
With brioche.
Of course.
I am going home to Australia. I go every year over the Christmas period. It's when I try and decompress. I'm also so far away from the rest of the world that I can shut down and have some time at the beach with my family, my parents, and the rest of my family. So,
Let's hope you don't have another Mumbai experience.
No, and suddenly
where you
dragged
suddenly
away.
get dragged away with the
Nature
phone
of
call.
our business.
It is. Great to see you in person.
So good to see you, Richard.
Until next time.